All right, so now, I've been looking forward to this, y'all. I'm about to transition and bring up our next speaker. She was gonna come up and talk one-on-one with you all, or 1-on-15 with you all. But I want you all to understand something. Last night, Sheba and I had a conversation. And when we got off the phone, I was ready. The gym was closed. I needed to go box. The pool was closed. I couldn't go swimming. And I had my medicine, but I was pissed. I was so mad because what she is about to share, she'll have an opportunity to get in depth. But I want you guys to understand, politics, like John was saying, is a sleazy business. And politicians, you understand, they're only significant as long as they're in office. So their primary job is what? To stay in office. And in order to stay in office, you have to pander. And pander, if you don't know, that means you tell the person in front of you what they want to hear so they feel good. So if you pander, what does that mean? You are lying 50% of the time. You gotta understand, the politicians in our state do not necessarily want people that look like us to be involved in this industry other than being a consumer. And she's gonna talk about some things to give you some insight into that. Because we as a community, and I'm talking about the community of cannabis enthusiasts and entrepreneurs, have to understand politicians don't do what you need them to do until you make them do what you need them to do. As my boss used to say, if you don't ask, you don't get. And when you ask and you don't get, then you demand. And if you demand and they don't hear you, now you got to go take it. Because I asked 2 times, now I'm coming to take it. We haven't gotten to that point yet, but I was there last night. So please help me welcome to the front of the room, Sheba Williams.
So my name is Sheba Williams. I am a Richmond, Virginia native. I am the founder and executive director of No Left Turns. We are a Richmond, Virginia-based reentry organization. We started in 2016 providing direct services for individuals being released from Virginia Department of Corrections. Over the course of that time providing direct services and meeting so many people, we became involved in advocacy. For about a decade, we've been fighting for expungement for the state of Virginia for people who have past convictions, because up until 2021, there was no relief if you had ever been charged with a crime in the state of Virginia, to include non-convictions, which means if you are arrested and you fight a case, you pay for an attorney, you pay a bond, you take time off of work to go back and forth to court because you typically go about 3 times, and then you prove your innocence. That thing that you were arrested for remained on your record. You would have to pay $98 per charge to go into a circuit court to request that a thing that you proved your innocence for be removed from your record. And I thought that was crazy. So I started working for expungement, and in 2020, Governor Northam put $25 million for expungement in the cannabis bill. I don't know why he did that to me, but I had to read about 500 and some pages of a document to learn about the cannabis bill, and that is how my fight began in this work. So I am new in the space. I think I am the baby of the whole process of the criminalization of cannabis and how we can break it down. Make no mistake about it, this 5'3" young lady works to break down a barrier of incarceration every single day of my life. We're going to talk about the history of prohibition and how it started. A lot of people think that it started with the 1994 crime bill that our current president and the Clintons and all of the people started, but it started in the 1920s. Prohibition first started in 1920 with the Uniform State Narcotic Drug Act. We decided through the course of years that we will criminalize cannabis and make sure that people did not have access to it. One, because there's a debate with the legal pharmaceutical industry to keep their drugs flowing through bodies of people. And there's also this moral thing that says we have to control communities to make sure that they don't make money off of this plant. So it's criminalized. And over the course of time, we got things like the Federal Highway Funding Act that said that if we didn't arrest people for drug convictions, that we would lose millions of dollars in funding, which even comes down to now where if you want to remove a DUI, if you want to have a DUI expunged, you're not able to do it because it has to stay on your record by law for 11 years because of an agreement with the United States government and their funding for our federal highways in different states. Virginia is one of those states. Every president, every legislator has been responsible for pushing the incarceration and criminalization of this plant for decades, even before I was alive. 1970, we officially outlawed any type of use of cannabis, including medical cannabis. We started mandatory minimums and three strikes laws around 1984 with the Reagan administration when the DEA was created, and it was not until 2015 or 16 in this state that we legalized medical cannabis. So it hasn't been that long. The fight for, we don't call it recreational use because it's not about recreation. It is about adult use. It is about a responsible adult use because just because people don't go in front of a physician or a doctor does not mean that they're not curing a medical concern. It just means that they didn't go through the same path that everybody took. And we have to give notice and time for people to have autonomy over their bodies. I fight against criminalization because we know that it does not just remove a person from our community, it doesn't just take away a person from the family. When that person returns from incarceration, there are 46,000 collateral consequences that come behind the conviction that they have already served their time for, paid their fines and fees for, done their parole or probation for. And those things include things like not being eligible for federal financial aid if you had certain drug convictions, not being eligible for SNAP or TANF. It wasn't until 2021 when we removed the clause that said that if you had been convicted of a crime of distribution, that you wouldn't qualify for SNAP, which meant not just the person, but the household, the children in the household, the families. And that onus falls on the community because if you have children that are hungry, and we have to set up food pantries and make sure that those people are fed, it meant that people couldn't work in certain positions. It meant that people could not live in certain communities, even if they could afford it and they qualified for it. They couldn't live in certain places. We talked about some of the things earlier that happen when prohibition permeates a community. It's not just about that person who gets put in handcuffs. It's about the whole community. We talk about gentrification and how this housing problem has exploded. But we think about how many people are denied the opportunity to live where they need to live where it's safe. So in the history of prohibition that we've been fighting for since the 1920s, we're trying to make sure that when we start this process, we're not continuing to criminalize this plant. And that is what's happening currently in present day. And we'll talk about that in a little while when we get further down the line. But let's talk about the history of record sealing. In 1977, our government put in LIS, which is our legal information system, that they knew the impact of a conviction or an arrest meant losing opportunity to employment, housing, education, and different social services programs. Somewhere along the line, and I'm not certainly sure when, they removed that language that said that they knew what the result of a conviction could do. There was only a way for people who had non-convictions to go through the court process and have that thing removed. That meant that if a person was proven not guilty or had been no process or had gone through a process of being adjudicated where they were acquitted, they could request to have a thing removed from their record. That's where you go in and pay this $98 per charge, and you wait for the Commonwealth attorney to see if they'll challenge it. You go back into court, and they decide whether or not you can remove this thing that you were found not guilty of from your record. There are millions of people who qualify for expungement of their records, which means that their record is destroyed and moved from public view. But in 2021, during the uprisings and the summer of what we call clarification for some people, after the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and many other people, when people were forced to pay attention to what's been happening in our communities for centuries, we fought this fight, and through many special sessions, we had people testify before the legislators and say, these are the things that happen when you are arrested for a crime, and we need relief for people who have convictions. In 2021, the first ever expungement, record sealing, not expungement, record sealing law was passed in the state of Virginia for people who have convictions as a result of about 20 people getting together to create a thing called the Virginia Expungement Council. We all met over Zoom, never met in real life until this year, and we fought for this bill to be passed. We have never had a process for people who have had convictions to have things removed from their record from public view, to allow them opportunity. Record sealing is different from expungement in the sense that when your record is sealed, it is still accessible by state police, by federal government, by different employers who have access, who work with vulnerable populations. Expungement means that your record is destroyed after a certain amount of time, usually about 3 to 5 years, depending on what type of offense it is. We settled on record sealing in 2021 because there are certain groups that still need to have access, even for our immigrant communities. In order to prove that they should be able to live here, they have to have access to their past criminal records. So we had to make decisions about who has access and who does not. It is really important to continue the fight to make sure that it is expanded for people who have records, all people who have records, to have access to opportunity once they have completed their state-sanctioned time. The other thing, and the last thing that I'll talk about in the history of prohibition, is resentencing. Resentencing means that for decades, we didn't have a crime commission until about 1994. Before that time, people were being sentenced an exorbitant amount of time for whatever crimes they were convicted of, and there were no guidelines. We didn't have sentencing guidelines until the mid-1990s. We were asking for records to be looked at and people to be given the opportunity to go back before a judge to have their sentence revised, if necessary. Right now in the state of Virginia, there are 11 people who still sit in prisons for cannabis-only offenses. There are 573 people who sit in Virginia's prisons who have cannabis plus other offenses. What we do not count and cannot count is how many people were stopped and searched by illegal means for the smell of marijuana by police in Virginia. They do not get relief, and they are not considered in these numbers at all. So that's the history. And it is a very recent history for certain things, so we'll go on to where we are now. We are in a really strange place with cannabis law right now in Virginia. 2021, we got a new administration who do not believe that cannabis should be legalized. We did not complete the job of legalization when our Democrats were in a trifecta, which means they were in the majority in the House of Delegates, the Senate, and the governor's office. Now we are in a strange stronghold with a government who does not believe that people should benefit from cannabis at all, unless it is the federal government. Our current state laws are still enacting new crimes and criminalization for cannabis offenses. They are making sure that young people who are under the age of 21 are criminalized if they are caught with possession of drugs. And I want you to think about how the opioid crisis compares to the cannabis thing. We offer treatment for people who suffer from opioid use. We offer treatment for people who use other things. But if you are caught with cannabis, you serve jail time. We still have mandatory minimums for certain cannabis offenses. We still have processes that criminalize people, and it's not always jail time. If you have up to an ounce of marijuana in this state, you are able to walk. If you have over an ounce, you're subject to a $25 civil penalty. There's been a fight behind closed doors for the past couple of months with the Cannabis Control Authority Board. I serve on the Cannabis Equity Reinvestment Board. We do not even have funding to meet because there is no legal path for recreational sales to generate revenue. This is really important that we sit dormant and don't get to make decisions about who gets the 30% of revenue that was codified into our code. And it was proposed that K through 12 education gets money, recovery centers get money, HBCUs get money, people who are coming out of incarceration get money, and right now we're at a standstill because this government will not make a decision about legalization. So the things that are legal, the things that are safe to do, are carry up to 1 ounce on your person. Go see Sarah, because you cannot get you can still be criminalized for what we call an open container if you do not lock up your product when you're traveling with it. There is no interstate travel between states. It's legal to possess, but there's no real legal way to obtain it in this state. So it puts us in this really great area where we have to be careful and tread lightly about how we move with things. Because they'll say, oh yeah, it's legal to obtain it, but if you're growing it in your yard and you're growing over 6 plants, initially, you could be receiving a felony if you didn't label your plants correctly. We fixed that a couple of weeks ago with the compromise that said you no longer are eligible for a felony if you mislabel your plants, but you could be fined. And it used to be that you could only possess up to 4 ounces in your home. Now there is no limit on what you can possess in your home. But if you are a renter, you're still subject to what your landlord says is appropriate in their property. You don't have the luxury of standing outside on your front porch and smoking. Because if you have a landlord, you still are restricted by what they accept, and they will usually go by what they have deemed acceptable with cigarettes. So you have to be careful about what you do with this plant while you're using this plant until this legislation decides that they will properly legalize in full cannabis. The governor added new crimes to the budget and said that if you possess in public over 4 ounces, you could go straight to a felony. And we fought, and we fought, and we fought over. No other state in this country goes from civil penalty to felony. So they put a misdemeanor in place. We have to pay attention to who we vote into office, because this administration is dead set on criminalizing Black and brown people and also making sure that corporate America benefits from the sale of this plant. We have to be mindful, we have to stand up, and we have to have communication with the people who represent us. We have to know their position on things before we put them in office. Because what is happening right now is people are being sacrificed while this state is trying to figure out how they best legalize and take full advantage of the monetary benefits while not taking care of the consumers and the people and the patients in this state. I already talked about our current legal challenges and where we are and knowing your rights, but it is really important for you all to listen to some things. I serve on the board of Virginia NORML. Virginia NORML has been fighting for legalization for 2 decades. There are other organizations across the state, there are coalitions across the state who put out information and content about what's going on a very high level. And I tell you this, what you take away from this today is all the things that I'm telling you are things that I have researched, and I would love for you to trust me, but I would love for you to trust and verify. Not just me, but other people, because there's bad information being put out every single day about where we stand in this fight. And there are people who won't show up to the non-public meetings, where there are people who won't come to a Cannabis Control Authority Board meeting, and people who won't come to the Cannabis Health Authority Board meetings, and people who won't show up in General Assembly, but will put out a list of demands saying this is what we need. And they haven't talked to anybody. They haven't talked to anybody but the 6 people in their coalition. So trust but verify, even with me. I stand on everything that I say. But I take a challenge, and I'm always open to education and information, and I share what I know. But things are changing at rapid speed because things are being done behind closed doors, and we are being bartered against through legislation. And the first people who get bartered against through legislation are people who have contact with justice. People who are justice impacted and justice involved are the first people to be bartered. We saw yesterday, earned sentence credits was a bill that passed in 2020 that we worked on to make sure that people who are housed in Department of Corrections are rewarded for the best behavior, for having no infractions. And since this administration came into office in November, they have been fighting to break that down. In 16 days before people are scheduled to be released from DOC starting on July 1, 556 people who were given letters saying that they would come home between July 1 and August 30th have been rescinded that right and told that you're not going to come home because this administration didn't like the law that went into effect in 2020. So we have to pay attention to what's going on and fight for who we're fighting for and make sure that the people that we're voting in don't just give you a smile and a photo op when they come into your churches and your communities and say, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. Hold their feet to the fire, ask the hard questions, and get them on record. So when they get in office and they don't perform, you can say, all right, do what you're supposed to do, or we're going to advocate for somebody to run against you. It's called being primary. Take advantage of knowing your rights trainings. We'll be doing them all through the summer. I am always down to educate any group, any place, anytime. If we're doing it on the corner, I'm showing up on the corner. You have to follow where these laws are going right now, because right now, in this very critical time, when General Assembly is not in session, General Assembly typically meets for either 45 days or 60 days between January and March. When they're not in session, there are meetings that are happening. There are boards that people sit on that are making decisions, and that is JLARC, that is the Crime Commission. Those are the Cannabis Control Authority Boards, the Cannabis Health Authority Boards, and many different other groups that this governor is putting in place to make decisions about laws. So when they come back in January, they've already submitted their bills for the year. They start submitting in September and October. So it's important to reach out to your legislators year-round, not just through January and March, not just when it's televised through General Assembly, for those 45 to 60 days. It's important to talk to your representatives year-round and tell them what you want. Tell them what you need them to fight for. This cannabis conversation, we have to advocate for what we want, because decisions are being made every single day, whether we are paying attention or not. And if we do not advocate to our legislators who represent us what we want, they will make the decisions for us, and they will make the decisions based on what is best for them, not us. So I encourage you all to pay attention to the changes that are happening. Virginia Normal posts every day. They have a live every Friday at 4 p.m. on Facebook that talks about all of the changes that are happening that week, and things are happening every single week. Where do we go from here? The best way to protect yourself is to educate yourself. The best way to physically protect yourself is to lock it up, make sure that people don't have unauthorized access, keep it inside your home if you keep it inside your home. It is not legal under any means to exchange anything for cannabis. If you say you can come into this group and if you pay a small fee and we'll provide cannabis for free, that is not legal. You have to take precautions to protect yourself, because even though things are deemed legal, police will still use that against you. They will still stop you and try to search you and say that they smell cannabis and they need to search your vehicle. It is up to you to know your rights. It is up to us to educate our young people, especially. It is up to us to know the changes that are happening every single day. But the best thing you can do with your product, if you're going to indulge, is protect yourself, protect yourself, protect yourself. Lock it up, put it in the trunk. If you have a lock on your glove compartment, lock it there. Not if you have to go in and grab your registration or anything from the glove compartment, because that gives access. That says that it can be accessible. The best thing to do is put it in your trunk, not use ever while you're driving. And if you are in a rented home, have a space where you can actually indulge without risking being evicted from your place because you choose to use. Whether you have a medical card or not, that landlord gets to decide whether or not you can use in their home, whether you can smoke in their home. So you have to know where you personally are in this position. It is really important to take ownership of self while we're in this crazy period where there is no real legalization, but there is legalization, because in 2020, we legalized simple possession of marijuana. And we said that we would seal the records of people who had simple possession automatically. And it's sealed from public view from Virginia State Police, but it's not sealed from public view on the court's websites, which is a public website. And then in 2021, we said that we would automatically remove simple possession of a misdemeanor distribution charge. I don't know too many people who have a misdemeanor distribution charge, so that was wordplay. These word games that are being played is what we have to pay attention to and know the very small fraction of people who actually got pleaded down to a misdemeanor distribution charge, but it really doesn't happen. So, it's still accessible by public view. Ultimately, in 2025, when Virginia State Police updates their records, those things will be removed from public view. But right now, they are still impacting people's ability to house, employ, educate, transport kids on trips, be a foster parent, and different things like that. So it is really, really important to understand where you are in this conversation, where we are and how we're going to get to legalization. And that is the goal. The end goal is to get the legalization that is for us. So we have to give input. We have to talk to people in our community about why this is an important thing. We can't just keep letting it be a taboo thing. We cannot just keep it in small groups. It has to be talked about in a loud form and fashion. And people have to understand that this is something that we work for and we deserve, because we have been taken away from. We've been divested from the most. When the war on drugs started happening in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, our communities lost public funding for schools. We incarcerated at a rate of $30,000 per person per year in DOC. We educated at a level of $12,000 per student. And we were talking about third grade. Through the census, we started looking at how many prisons we can build based on how many black kids are in third grade classrooms. If we are not outraged by that, I don't know what it's going to be. Because the community and the government and the legislators take the position that it is okay to keep criminalizing our communities and expect us to thrive, and they get surprised when we actually do thrive with all the barriers in place. The criminalization of this plant has taken away funding from parks and recs, from programs. If you look around, how many basketball courts are there? How many summer job programs are there for teenagers that we used to have? Do you think that's by design? It absolutely is. It was very intentional to take away public school funding. We've seen in the past 2 years the fight to take away public school funding and penalize the teachers and expect them to perform with less resources, to pay for their own products. And now in 2022, this new administration is pushing lab schools and charter schools and saying that we should pay for it, so that they can pick and choose who gets the best access to education. All of that is tied into cannabis because the revenue goes there. If we don't stand up and say, we deserve for our communities to be invested in the most because we have been taken from the most. That is a fact in this, and there is documentation, and there are all of the information that support the fact that our communities get policed the most, our families get incarcerated at the highest rate, and if you think it is just black men, you are wrong. In the past decade, women have gone to prison for longer sentences at an 800% increased rate. Since 1990, we have incarcerated more women percentage-wise than any other population. And we only have 2 women's prisons in the state of Virginia. All of this is done by design. This is something that we have to start speaking out about because everybody wants to make $1 off of this plant. Everybody wants to get into this business and make the money. Nobody is talking about the people that were left behind and the people whose communities were ravaged by the war on drugs. Not just through incarceration, but in funding of small businesses and funding of communities where we have dilapidated homes. It is because of gentrification and fight or flight. People look at the census every 10 years and decide what is the median income. That means how much we're investing in jobs to see whose homes we can take. They say if minimum wage was $7.25 an hour for years, we just got to $9 a year ago. We'll head to $11 at a point, on a gradual point, but they're still fighting to say that we can't make $15 an hour. $15 an hour averages to $31,000 a year. Who do you think can survive off of that when you have rents that used to be $700 that are now $3,000 for a 1-bedroom? And we say we want to benefit from this plant, but we don't want to correct the wrongs of the past that we have attributed to. That is what we have to talk to our legislators about, and that is what it is our duty to fight for and fight against. We have to know the holistic picture of this and how it benefits everybody in the community. Because if you're going to come into this industry, it is your duty to make sure that the door doesn't close behind you. Don't have me multitasking, y'all. First, we got to talk about what equity and inclusion is in this. It is not just about making sure that black and brown people can participate in this industry. It is about making sure that small business owners can participate in this industry, that hemp farmers who are in Virginia can benefit from this industry. It is also about making sure that we sacrifice enough to educate people. Sir, you asked a question about what you can do right now, and Sarah said there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do on the end of starting up a business and getting started. But what you can do is get a business plan together, get a funding plan together, go through the boot camp that Paul offers, bring other people along and start a teaching plan. You can go online and get your business license together and start preparing for when we do legalize. Because what a lot of people think is, I don't have to start anything until legalization happens. But if you start when legalization happens, you are behind the curve. You know how long it takes to grow a plant. If we say that we're going to start legalization in September and you say, all right, I'm going to get involved in September, then you are already behind the ball. Take the steps necessary to secure your business plan, to get the education, to have the knowledge, to get the funding lined up. Talk to funders, talk to investors, get friends together to see how much they can input in a pool and a pot to start this work together. Because if we think that our government, this Virginia government that we have is going to pour into us, we are sadly mistaken. All the promises of centering people has never been visualized, has never been actualized. So get your people together, get your village together, and start building a funding stream for yourself. So we don't have to rely on banks who said that redlining was illegal and we don't discriminate against people in housing. But yet and still, it took 19 months for me and my husband, who are self-employed, to buy our home with assets, credit, and history. I've been self-employed since 2009. My credit score has been over 800 for 10 years, and we still were discriminated against. So while they say redlining was illegal, it is still absolutely happening. That is going to be the same process when it comes down to get the funding for starting these businesses. They're going to look at you and say, we're not going to legally discriminate, but we're going to find every hole in your story to say why we can't. So it is important to bring communities together to push these assets and put them in place, and having a business plan in place. Because it's great to say, let me just start this, but who's doing the market analysis? Who's advertising? Who is building your website and putting the information together and making sure that you know what is legal and what is not? Because there are caveats to everything. We can't just jump into this business because if you wanted to start a dentist office, you would get the necessary skill to get there. You have to be intentional about getting your skills together, getting your funding together, and getting your team together. Now, it was a blessing and a curse that retail sales market wasn't set up, because we would have been left behind this year, period. Social equity is about small business owners, not just justice-impacted people. And I want to talk about that specifically because that is my lane. There are a lot of people, Tommy Norman represents Williamsburg, who said on the Senate floor, we can't just give licenses to people who have been locked up for this. Well, who is better educated to do this than somebody who already has the experience? We can't keep separating people who got caught and people who didn't to say that they don't deserve to be in this business. Everybody deserves economic empowerment. Everybody deserves to do things if there's a means to do it. We have to embrace people who have past justice involvement because they have done their time. And if we say that our system is fair, then we know that we're telling a lie to ourselves. It's never been fair. Think about where you see speed traps, where you see police the most. I used to work at a barbershop on Tidewater Drive in Norfolk, and we had young men who came in every Friday to get their hair cut. They were from Virginia Beach, affluent community and neighborhood, and they would say to me, we have pill parties every week. We get together and we just dump a bunch of pills in a bowl from our parents' medicine cabinets, and we just take whatever. And I used to say, you can kill yourself. You don't know what you're taking. You're taking uppers, downers, you're taking Viagra, you don't know what you're taking. It was acceptable because they didn't have a police presence in their neighborhood unless they called them. We have the honor of seeing police at every corner in our neighborhoods. That doesn't mean we have safer neighborhoods. That means we're going to jail at higher rates. And if we think about crime and we think about legality, we got to know that every July 1, we get a new set of crimes because our legislators go in and make new crimes. Nobody goes back and says, maybe we got this wrong. Because with this plant, with cannabis, we got it wrong. We made the mistake of criminalizing people for something that the state couldn't figure out how to legalize and benefit the most off of. So they said, let's fill our prisons. Let's make DOC the number 2 employer in the state, because I misspoke earlier. Walmart is our number 1 employer. DOC may be in the lead again because when COVID happened, Walmart didn't do 24-hour operations anymore, but DOC does. They got to be 24-hour operation every single day of the week, Monday through Sunday. We invest $12,000 in a student per year. We invest $31,000 in a person who is incarcerated per year. Where is the outrage? We will give people trades for free if they are incarcerated. but we will pay $30,000 for a degree, for a 4-year degree. The difference is, if you are incarcerated and you get that trade, whether it be electrician, HVAC, print press, barber, whatever, there's a 20-year look back on Virginia Department of Occupational Regulation applications to say, tell me about your criminal history for the past 20 years, and you can be denied your professional licensing. Peer recovery specialists in this state who are the best positioned to teach a person who is going through what they have overcome are denied the ability to be a peer recovery specialist because of barrier crimes. All of these correlate to what the barriers will be to licensing once we do legalize. I want you all to know that. I want you all to start supporting something that is bigger than yourselves. Because even if you don't experience it, it impacts you. Because you're paying for prison one way or the other. If you don't have a loved one who's been to prison, if you've never been yourself, your tax dollars are paying that $31,000 per person. So I'm going to wrap it up by saying, what can you do next? Maybe, maybe not. What can you do next? Vote, run, lead, and serve. What that means in vote in every election, not just the November election where we got a president up. You got to vote in June when we have primaries, and you got to vote in November when we have elections. I don't need it. When I say lead, if you got somebody that is in office that is not serving your needs, push them out. Go to your community and tell them what you're fighting for and make sure that they support you, because cash is king. You still got to run a campaign, and you still have to be well-funded to run and take these people out of position. But if you stand 10 toes down and you stand on everything that you fight for, we are going to support you. Because what we have now is a bunch of people in positions of power who think that they are above the community. We just got our first Black leader who is just as impacted to lead the House of Delegates. And the Republicans, when this comes up this session, they are going to fight tooth and nail and say that he is not the best. We put a criminal in place, but guess what else we put in place? A father, an attorney, a fighter, somebody who relates to what I have been through and what my family has been through and will fight for change based on what is right and not what is cute. Serve on boards. Look at these boards and see where your skills can go in, because these voices need to be in the room. Serve on juries. Stop avoiding jury duty, y'all. Because when they lock us up, the juries make the decisions about what is fair and what is not, and who is acquitted and who is incarcerated. That impacts our whole community when we lose a community member. If you take my brother, sister, mother away, who's taking care of the kids through social services? Because we got to think about this. In adoption, you'll pay a family $3,000 a month, but if I have my child and I can't afford child care, you'll put me in handcuffs. Serve, lead, run, vote. Get people registered to vote. Get people's rights reinstated. It is our responsibility to be responsible for the community that we are in. It is our responsibility and our duty to make sure that people have the tools necessary. Vote, run, lead, serve. Thank you.